Hey Gateway, welcome back and thank you for joining me again. I know it's not optimal to be watching me on a screen as opposed to be able to interact in person, but in this season we're doing our best to be able to stay in the Word and to encourage one another to keep the faith. And I am taking us through right now, it's continuing through the book of Psalms. And I started this series because about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, in my own personal life, I began to study the Psalms earnestly. I would say I was just really reading and thoroughly and trying to understand what was being taught here. And that was out of my own effort to become more of a man of prayer and to learn how to pray and to gain that ability to look at whatever circumstance, whatever situation I am facing, and look at it with God in my perspective, and to face it with a God-centered lens and to be able to speak God's truth into that situation and over that whatever I am facing. And the Psalms really help us to find the words to articulate what we're experiencing and how we approach God. And so that's what kind of started this whole series off. And originally what my plan was to take us and kind of go verse by verse through the Psalms. But if you haven't noticed, there's 150 of them, and it'll take me probably about 14 years to go verse by verse. And so that's not the strategy I'm doing now. I'm just going to kind of take a few verses here and there through the Psalms that I believe God is speaking to us in this season. And we're going to unpack them and share some thoughts on the Word of God from the Psalms here. And today we're looking at Psalm 8. And I mentioned last week that the next few Psalms I saw a consistent pattern, a big theme in the next few Psalms that came up. And what that was is that David, who's the author of these Psalms, he's facing a crisis. He's facing a situation. And whatever he's facing, you could say he's being tempted, or any human be prone to take their eyes off of God and to say, what is going on? What is happening? And we get shaken up a little bit. And that's what happens each psalm. He sees a problem and goes, wait a minute. But each time, his remedy is he recenters himself back on truth. And that's so key for us to remember that whenever we are prone to fear or to sin or to worry or to whatever, at that moment, what is happening is we are taking our eyes off of truth. You know, Jesus said in John 8:32, he said, the truth will set you free. Now, he is truth. His word is truth. When we remember his truth and focus on his truth, we are free from sin, free from believing the lies. And we can center ourselves on that and rest in his promises, rest in his truth, and trust that God will work it all out. And so Psalm 8, it deals with the problem of insignificance, the problem of meaninglessness, of purposelessness. I can't say that word. Insignificance. Go back to that one. And that's what I talk about today. Is when the world seems cold and indifferent to us, when life might seem meaninglessness, I'm bumbling again. When it looks insignificant, we turn to Psalm 8 is a good place to turn to recenter ourselves on our purposes in God. And so I want to read Psalm 8. It's only a few verses, and then I want to focus on a couple verses in the middle. And so Psalm 8, it begins. It says, O Lord our God, O Lord our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. Your glory is higher than the heavens. You have taught children and infants to tell of your strength, silencing your enemies and all who oppose you. When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them, human beings that you should care for them? Yet you made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority, the flocks and the herds and the wild animals, the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, and everything that swims in the ocean currents. O Lord, our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. Oh, thanks be to God for his word. But today I want to look at just verse 3 to 6, where he says, and I look at the night sky, and I think, what is man? What is man? When I was in university, had to take science courses. Now in high school, I'd already taken chemistry and biology and physics and all that kind of standard stuff. And so in university, I signed up to take astronomy. So I took a couple different astronomy courses in college. And I'll never forget one illustration that the professor did. He took out of his pocket a quarter, And he said, I want you to imagine this quarter is our solar system. And so the size of this quarter is a solar system. The sun is at the center, and Pluto is on the outer ring of the quarter. And you see how small it is. And he said, now realize, and think about this, the nearest star outside of our solar system would be several football fields away. Several football fields away. And that's just mind-boggling how big our galaxy is. And then to think about how there are billions of stars in our galaxy, each would be several football fields apart from each other. And our galaxy is only one of countless billions of galaxies that we have, we can think of. It's astronomical, literally, how big our universe, our galaxy is. How big the starry nights are. It's incredible. And in that light of that, what is man? What are we? And compared to just how big that is. And I remember learning that the speed of light travels 186,000 miles a second. 186,000 miles. And it takes, our nearest galaxy is the Andromeda Galaxy. And it would take 2 million light years to get there. It would take light 2 million years to get there. As far as just the scope of that, that's just incredible. What is man? In comparison to all that, in comparison to the glory of God and the vastness of the universe and the galaxy, what is man? When I was a kid also, I read Calvin and Hobbes, as many people have. I grew up, I think I owned every one of the Bill Watterson's books. I read them over and over and over again. And I have lots of them, memorized. But one of them, for today, I remember, is that it's simple. It's you see Calvin, and he is standing under a starry sky, and he's peering up into the night sky, and he hollers out, I'm significant. I'm significant. And it's laughable because what is man? Are we significant? Do we truly matter? Psalm 8, it says, what is man? What are mortals? You think of them, the son of man. And that in the Hebrew, it's the son of Adam. And what that's going down to is we are sons of Adam. And Adam comes from Adamah, which is just dust. We're just dust. We're just from the dirt, which you know that from Genesis. We're made from the dirt, from dust, from, it's like we're just piles of dirt on a small speck of dirt in an endless galaxy. What is man? And so that's his crisis. What are we? Does anything we do actually matter? Is there a purpose of this? Is it any significance to any of this? And before I talk about how we gain right perspective on that, which he shows us here in the psalm, I want to point out first that he's actually correct in asking that question. And it's actually a correct thought that we are small. We are very small. And that's a really good antidote to us for pride. Because it's easy for us, to puff ourselves up and think more highly of ourselves than we ought to. To think we're more important than we really are. To think we're bigger than we really are. When in reality, we are small. And let's realize that. And that's actually healthy to do that. And here's why. Because when we realize that we are insignificant in ourselves, we can look to the one who can give us purpose and meaning. That was something that the teacher in Ecclesiastes really wrestled with. And this is a teacher who had lots of wisdom. And he says, I try to figure out the meaning of life. I try to figure out what is a purpose. And if you read the book before, you know over and over again he says, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. And he's saying trying to find meaning in life is like trying to grab smoke. You see it, you try and grab it, but it's not quite there. You can't really get a hold of it. He says it's vanity, it's purposeless. I can't find meaning. So I tried everything. I tried working hard. I tried having fun and not working hard. I tried reading all these books. I tried whatever you could think of, you name it. I tried it to try to find meaning. He said I couldn't find meaning. And he says in the beginning, you know, because generations come and generations go, but the earth just stands here. You know, the earth doesn't care what I do. The mountains don't care what I do. You know, those distant stars don't care what I do. You know, matter around us doesn't care. If I try and find meaning just in a purely materialistic perspective, I can't. And so he closes his book in chapter 12 and says, so here's the end of it all. Here's what it comes down to. Fear God and follow him. Because when it's all said and done, the only thing that can possibly give our life meaning is our Creator. Because when it's all said and done, the only thing that is there is yourself and your Creator. For he is the one that gives meaning. He's the one that gives life. We will not ever find meaning outside of him. And so we look at the starry night and go, what are we? It's a good question to ask, to realize that we are dependent on something outside of ourselves to give us meaning. We are dependent on a Creator to give us life and to give us purpose. And so that question is a good antidote to pride and trying to think that we can make meaning for ourselves. We can find meaning for ourselves. And that is not something we do. God gives us meaning. God shows us his purpose for our life. And so, and that's the key here, is that we want to make sure to bring God back into the picture of what we're looking at. And Psalm 8 tells us that, you know, he asks the question, what is man? What is man? And thank God that God does care about us. And that's what he says next. You know, he says, you know, what is man that you think about them, that you remember them, you care for us, you are mindful of us. And that's the big thing. It says, you know, what are we? But number one, he says, you do know us, you do care about us, you do remember us. And that is essential. The stars don't care about you and I, but the maker of the stars does. And he knows the stars by name, and he knows the number of hairs in her head. Our God, our Creator, he knows us and cares about us. And so yes, on a purely materialistic level, we are horribly insignificant. But in God's eyes, he cares. He loves us. He remembers you. He knows you. And you might ask, well, how is that possible? There's all those countless billions of stars. If he's that big, why would he care about little old me? And that's the second point, is that God is so big. He is so big that he can care about you. And God is so much bigger than the galaxy that he's big enough to care about you and me as well. And that's what, I get that from, you know, he talks about the verse 3, the night sky, all the stars, he says, are the work of your fingers. The work of your fingers. You know, remember that old, that children's song, he's got the whole world in his hands? You know, it's a nice image. You know, it's actually, this says that's not quite right. He has the whole heavens in his fingers. He's so much bigger than we can imagine. And when you think about how 2 million light years to the nearest galaxy, 93 million miles to the sun, and God says in his fingers, he just makes all that. Effortless. He's so much bigger than we can imagine. Later on in Psalm 33:6, it says, you know, God merely spoke and the heavens were created. He breathed and the stars were born. I remember again, the sun is nearly 1 million times bigger than Earth. And the sun is not even a very big star. And God just breathes that out. God just breathes out stars. Again, the sun's 93 million miles away and it can still burn us. And God just breathes that out. How great is our God? How big is our God? And that is a very humbling thought. Who are we to think we can adequately, successfully rebel against him? How dare we think we can, rebel against our God. And completely futile. The glory and the magnitude of God is beyond anything we can imagine. That's why the psalm begins. Your majestic name fills the earth. Your glory is beyond the heavens. Your glory is beyond anything we can imagine. That's the greatness of our God. I want to read Isaiah 40, verse 26 and on. It says, "Look up into the heavens. Who created all the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by its name. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing." And then verse 27 says, "O Jacob," that's like us, the church, "how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? O Israel, how can you say God ignores you? Have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." Look to the heavens. Who created these? If I am big enough to create all of that, I am big enough to sustain you and to know you and to care for you and to love you. That's the glory of our God. So, third thing here to remember, when we're feeling insignificant in light of our existence here, remember, God is so much bigger than the universe. He knows us by name. He cares about us. And three, it's a very simple point, but it's important. It says, you made them. We are made by God. We are made by God, it says in verse 5. We are made by God. You know, and to be made by God means that we are wanted by God. I was listening to John Lennox, who is a genius professor over across the Atlantic of mathematics and such, and he was talking about God and why he believes in God. And he said his son asked him one day, why am I here? Why am I here, Dad? And he said, well, son, you're here because I wanted you to be here. I wanted you. I wanted a child. And that's the same for you and I. Why are we here? Because God wanted us to be here. We are made by God. We are wanted by Him. God says, I want you. And it's wonderful to know that we are wanted. That God delights in knowing us and delights in knowing you. So we are, and that's just a simple truth, but to remember that we are made by God. And occasionally I'll get get an item you buy, and it'll say in there, sometimes, and occasionally I have a little slip of paper in there, and it'll say this item has been made by this employee number. Sometimes have a number on there. Sometimes it will have the actual name. If you and I were to have that, it would say made by God on us. We are made by God and therefore wanted by God. And it goes on in verse 5. So we're made by God, and says we're a little lower than the angels, a little lower than God, a little lower than the divine realm. Now that deserves a little reflection there. What's he saying? And it's both humbling and exalting. We're a little lower than, we're not divine. We are not supernatural. We are not in that realm. And so it's humbling in that sense that we are, remember our place. We are not God. We're not even angels. We are on earth. We are humans. We are earthlings. And let's know our place there. But also it's exalting. We're not just matter. We're not just a son of dust. We're just a little lower than angels. We have exalted status here. It's That famous line by Yoda in Star Wars, I can't really do his voice, illuminous beings are we. That's terrible, Yoda. Illuminous beings are we, not this crude matter. He's partly right there. We're not just crude matter. We're not just stardust that's, electrified and came to life. We are a little lower than angels. We are made by God and given position and a place in his creation. He says, this is where you are, this is where you belong. And so it's both humbling and exalting there that we're a little lower than the divine, than the angels. And verse 5 goes on. It says, you've crowned them with glory and honor. And God has placed on each of us a crown of glory and honor. Now that word glory is used a lot in kabod, but the word really means it's weighty. It means worth. It means God has put on your head, says you have worth. You have dignity. You have honor. On each and every person that God has made, he says you have worth. You have glory. And where does it come from? Him. He has crowned us. He has given us that. And if God has given us that worth, if God has declared we have dignity and we have value in his eyes, no one can take that away. And so we treat every person as if they have worth, because guess what? They do. If God has says they do, nothing can take that away. Nothing can change that. We all have worth because God has crowned on each of our heads that worth, that glory, that honor, that dignity that only he can give and no one can take away. And verse 6 now. Verse 6, it says, you gave them charge of everything you have made. That tells us that God has given us responsibility and purpose in his creation. He's given us responsibility. He's given us dominion. He said, this is my creation that I made. I want you now to rule over it and take care of it. That's responsibility and purpose. A phrase I learned in Uchalnith, I'll try and not mess it up like I do with Yoda and everything else. But the phrase, it's Usma Isma Nas. The earth is the Lord's. Anahaimen Uatlak. Ours to care for. I love that phrase that our New Chandler friends have. The earth is our creator's. It's ours to care for. And that's what this verse is saying. It's his. He's given us responsibility to care for this, to have exercise good leadership over this creation. And, that means we get to create, we get to build, we get to restore, we get to preserve, we get to garden, we get to write, we get to all those wonderful things that each of us, God has given us some way, some gift, to explore, to understand, to learn, to discover, to I said garden already, take care of the flocks, the animals. God said, this is your responsibility and your purpose in my creation. So each of us have some gift that God has given us. So this is what, have fun. Let loose. Use the gift God has given us here as he has given us responsibility here. And so put all that together here. And so it's a lot of points, but it's so important to get this. He has given us purpose. He's given us responsibility. He has given us worth and dignity and honor. He's given us position. We're not just another one of the beasts here. We are just a little lower than angels. We are made by God. We are wanted by God. We are known and cared for and loved by God. And God is bigger than the vastness of our universe even. And so, it's a key thing in all of these points. When we feel insignificant or that there maybe not be meaning, the key thing in here is to put God back into the picture. Because all of those revolve around what God says. What God says. This week, I looked up the definition of insignificant, because that was kind of the key word I was thinking of for this. And the top two definitions that came up that I saw, number one was, for definition of insignificance, number one was too small or unimportant to consider. And number two was without power or influence. Now that was so cool, because that's exactly what God has given us, those things that are lacking. He says, I do consider you. You are important to me. And I have given you responsibility and position and influence in my creation. And so we are not insignificant in God's eyes. You know, on a purely materialistic scale of matter, yes, we are insignificant. We cannot compare to the stars in the night sky. So in just the eyes of matter, we're nothing. But in the eyes of God, you and I truly do matter. And so without God, it's pretty bleak and pointless. But with God, our purposes are everlasting. Thank you for listening. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And remember those truths in Psalm 8. Amen.